Hello and welcome to a Kubeflow community presentation. Today is a very exciting day. For the last few months, the Kubeflow community has been working on Kubeflow 1.5 release. And today we're going to have several subject matter experts walk through the details of this release. My name is Josh Bottom and I work as a Kubeflow community product manager. And I'll walk through a quick introduction of Kubeflow in the community. Often people have asked me over the years, why Kubeflow? And I think as you look at companies that are building ML platforms, we understand that they come in and they often have a team of 5, 10 or more people involved. They're looking at making a multi-million-dollar, multi-year investment. And before there was Kubeflow, we often saw that people were tracking many tools in communities. It took months of analysis and integration. They had to build, test, and document support practices for their ML platform and often ended up with some type of custom fork with limited portability between clouds. Kubeflow is a Kubernetes native ML platform, and it is a tool set that provides an integrated end-to-end workflows with the nice capabilities of portabilities between on-prem and public cloud, as well as the ability to use Kubernetes efficiencies. The major purpose that folks really look to have in an ML platform and an ML platform team is to build more models and have better business results. And I believe that what we've shown is the architecture of Kubeflow reduces ML sprawl and allows for these better business results. Over the years, we've seen many market leaders from different disciplines come in, LinkedIn, Spotify, Gojek, Intuit, to name a few, talk about and document their experience, doubling the effectiveness of their ML engineers, or teams producing as many as 7 times more experiments, and ride-hailing jobs up to 100 million ride-hailing jobs per bookings per month. And even in Intuit saying supporting multiple products in production over time. And these documents have been very helpful for other people. And I think that sharing of the experience is something that people do appreciate in the community. And we've seen the community grow. This is the results from the user survey results from 2021. We saw the number of responses grow 50% year over year, the number of people in production grow over 300%. And if you look at this chart, you'll understand that the ML engineers are really driving a lot of the influence of where we add functionality into Kubeflow. Architects, as well as DevOps engineers, data scientists, software engineers, product managers, all of them are providing us with great influence on how we drive the roadmap. So that really gets to the community structure and the release purpose. The users being very important, working with the Kubeflow release team to be able to discuss with the working groups and the distributions how a release should come out and what features should be there. And really the idea is to bring in new functionality that simplifies operations and streamlines ML workflows. And from this, we have also used a process which is managed by a release handbook. So the documentation of the release has really helped us improve both our timelines and our quality, and to help folks understand who's doing what and how to get features or enhancements into a release. And we provide many contact points, whether it's community meetings or working group meetings, the GitHub tracking, Slack, or email. I invite you to engage with the community, especially as we start to work on Kubeflow 1.6. With that, I'd like to introduce Dominic, who's going to walk through some details on Kubeflow 1.5.
Hello, everyone. I'm Dominic Fleischmann from Canonical, and I'm a member of the Kubeflow release team. So first of all, let's walk through the timeline of this release. Since we defined it in the middle of the release cycle, and there have been only 2 small changes, we increased the development time to 2 weeks, and also the release date was moved from March 9th to March 10th. But all in all, the release has been on a good track, and we've been moving along well. Next slide, please. To give you a general overview of what we achieved in this release, there is a roadmap which clearly states the different themes and features of different working groups. There is also specific roadmaps for each different working groups. There are milestones and timelines defined in this roadmap. Additionally, we've been using tracking issues on GitHub and the Handbook board to follow the release along. Some of the common themes in this release has been to organize on a consistent look and feel for the whole interfaces, dashboards. There has been the rebranding from KF Serving and KServe, which we'll iterate more on further along in the presentation. And one of the stretch goals was support for case 122. We haven't entirely achieved that, but we are getting closer to being able to support that in a future release. Next slide, please. Regarding specific component versions, notebooks is on the same version as Kubeflow 1.5. It is on 1.5. Training operator has updated to 1.4. Khatib has updated to 0.13. KFP pipelines has been moved to 1.8.1. And KServe, which was previously called KF Serving, is now 0.7. Regarding external dependencies, this release has been tested on Kubernetes 120 and 121. We have moved to Istio 111 and with Knative 0.22.1. We're still using Customize 3.2 and Cert Manager 1.5. Next slide, please. In this release, I think there has been a bigger effort from the distributions to work on in the distribution testing phase. Even though not all the distributions are ready on release date to update their distributions, there has been a big effort on testing. In general, I want to call out the ones that have been able to release on time, especially Google, IBM, and Nutanix. All the distributions have their specific tracking issues where users can follow up on them and follow how they will, when they will release and how they are moving along with the release cycle. And now I pass over to John.
Hi, everyone. I'm Jono from Nutanix, currently leading the training working group and the Automl working group. So for training, we are excited to announce 1.4 release for training operator. So this has more than 50 plus features and bug fixes. The key feature that was added is the elastic training support for the PyTorch job. So earlier in a normal PyTorch training job, it gets into a failed state when we lose a worker node and we have to restart the whole job. Right. So this is expensive and time consuming, particularly when the training happens for hours and days. So now with the elastic training support, which uses Torch Elastic in the backend, we can support fault tolerant and the elastic training. So you can scale up and down workers. So this is particularly useful when you have the spot instances, lowering the cost of the training. And the user just needs to provide the minimum and the maximum workers and need not worry about the node availability. And the standard ImageNet example is added to that. Apart from that, we have added v1 version of MPI operator in the training operator binary. So now we support TF job, PyTorch job, XGBoost, MXNet, and MPI job in a single operator. Also, we have added the elastic policy in the latest SDK released version 1.4. And we have made significant test coverage as well in the training operator. Josh, next slide, please. From the AutoML side, we are happy to announce 0.13 version release. It has few breaking changes when compared to the previous ones. Firstly, there is a change in the namespace label, which enables the captive metric collector injection. So which means if anyone wants to update the current cluster, you need to patch the namespace and the mutating webhook labels to reflect the newer one. So the major change is in the gRPC API field. So if you are using gRPC API directly in your project, you have to change the corresponding current request number field. Also, the label change for the default primary pods for training jobs. And this has to be added correctly to fetch metrics if you are for all your hyperparameter runs. Also, the default metric collector format has been enhanced to support more inputs for your metric collection. So all the start ones here, red start ones, are the breaking changes from the previous release. So with respect to new features, we have added more validations for early stopping feature. Also, currently, like the captive controller can run in the HA mode, supporting multiple replicas, and the leader is selected from the available ones. And we have added more examples to the repo. We have added the CatTP integration with the FPGA accelerator, with which the trials can take advantage of FPGA acceleration. Also, the MXNet job example is also added to that CatTP. And with respect to UI, more enhancements are made with respect to the feasible space and the hyperparameter selection. So again, if you want to contribute or participate in CatTip or the training, please join the bi-weekly meeting on Wednesdays. On to James.
Thank you, Jonu. Hello, this is James Liu from Kubeflow Pipelines Working Group. In this Kubeflow release, we have upgraded Kubeflow pipelines from 1.7 to 1.8.1. In this change, the major upgrade is that we have switched to Emissary Executor as the default executor for Kubeflow pipelines. So Emissary Executor is the workflow executor by Argo Workflow, which is our workflow engine. Previously, we used Docker executor as the default executor. But in order to support Kubernetes 1.20 or above, we have selected the Emissary Executor, which is the most flexible, most secure out of a few options of workflow executor that is offered by Argo Workflow. So if you have been using Kubeflow 1.4, you have to switch over to Emissary Executor in order to use the newer version of Kubernetes. But in this new release, you don't have to do that. We are going to use Emissary Executor as a default executor, and we welcome you to provide feedback if you find any issue or any experience with using Emissary Executor. Also, in the Kubernetes 1.22, we are going to use the Kubernetes API v1 and deprecate anything before that. So we have upgraded our Kubernetes manifest and the dependencies manifest. So we are compatible with Kubernetes 1.22 or above. So if you deploy Kubeflow pipeline standalone, you will be able to use Kubernetes 1.22. With that, let me hand it over to Paul.
Yeah, thanks, James. Hello, everyone. I am Paul Van Eck from IBM, and I am a member of the Kserve working group. However, before I give an update on Kserve, I will first give an update on the Kubeflow Pipelines with Tecton project on behalf of Tommy Lee, the project lead for KFP Tecton. So this project, as you may know, is an alternative to the Argo-based pipelines project. And with the Kubeflow 1.5 release, KFP Tecton version 1.1.1 is included as part of the release manifest. And with this release of KFP Tecton, Tecton Pipeline 0.30.0 is used, and support for Kubernetes 1.22 was added. Some notable features for this release are Big Data Passing now supports container storage interface integrations. Originally, only PVC was supported, so now S3-based storage can be used for big artifact storage and passing. The pipeline loop controller now supports loop retries and multi-pipeline workspaces. And finally, for recursion with the pipeline loop controller, you are now able to set the maximum stack size. Yeah, so at recursion, there could be endless loops that create too many pipeline runs that may crash the API server. So this setting is a safeguard against that. So if you want to learn more, you can check out the repo at github.com/kubeflow/KFP Tecton, and also check out the full changelog on the v1.1.1 release 0 release page there. Now moving on to Kserve. The name Kserve may be new to some people, so for those out of the loop, KF Serving was rebranded as Kserve. The KF Serving project graduated from the Kubeflow project, and in coordination with the Kubeflow project steering group, the repository was transferred to an independent GitHub organization called Kserve. And with the Kubeflow 1.5 release, Kserve v0.7.0 is included in the release manifest. The primary focus of this release was handling the rebranding. So the API group for the custom resources like inference services changed from serving.kubeflow.org to serving.kserve.io. And the new Python SDK name is now kserve. So now you should install with pip install kserve. So old inference services using the old group name will no longer work with kserve. So you can think of this as a breaking change. However, we do have migration instructions that will allow you to migrate existing inference services from KF serving to kserve without downtime. So definitely check the instructions out if looking to migrate. And so moving on, Model Mesh, which is a multi-model serving platform open sourced by IBM, does have preliminary support with kserve this release. We're still in the process of unifying these two projects. And so for those looking to try out Model Mesh, definitely check out the documentation on the kserve website. So as it's still an alpha feature with kserve, this needs an additional installation on your cluster. And it's not, the Model Mesh manifests aren't included in the Kubeflow manifest yet. It needs to be added after the fact. So now moving on again. So kserve now supports Kubernetes 1.22. Previously, we were using CRD and webhook API versions that were removed in Kubernetes 1.22. But these were updated, so the CRDs can now be deployed. The v1 alpha 2 API for inference services is now deprecated. So make sure you're using the v1 beta 1 API, which has been out for quite a while. So I think most people already are. Just good to bear this in mind. And so this release also includes alpha support for raw Kubernetes model deployment. This is an alternative deployment mode that allows models to be deployed on Kubernetes native resources. So instead of istio and knative resources being created for a model, the kserve controller will instead use Kubernetes deployment, service, and ingress resources. Deploying in this mode forgoes the need for knative and istio having to be installed on your cluster, which may be a plus for some. So you can check out the full changelog in the link down below. Check out the new kserve repo in the kserve GitHub org, and feel free to check out our bi-weekly working group meeting, which meets every other Wednesday. And with that, I thank you, and now I will pass it on to Kimonis.
Thanks, Paul. So I'm Kimonas Sotirjos. I'm wearing a couple of hats for this release. I'm representing the Notebooks and Manifest working group, and I'm also glad to be the release manager for 1.5. So continuing on, in our efforts to help users with KF serving to kserve migration support, we've also created a KF serving LTS repo whose only focus will be on trying to assist Kubeflow users that might not yet be ready to upgrade to KF serving. So the main purpose here is to try and include some critical bugs or security fixes required for folks that are not yet ready to upgrade. And the most important thing to keep in mind is that this repo is not where the main development happens. We would really urge users to try out and move on to kserve, which is where all the new features will take place and will be developed. Next slide, please. And with that, we have the Notebooks working group, which has a couple of components: the Notebooks infrastructure, central dashboard, and web apps. The most significant changes for this release is the Notebooks controller is going to be exposing idleness information for its notebook. And this time, the controller will be using the activity of its kernel in Jupyter Notebooks to update this information. So it will be adding timestamps on its notebook based on how the kernels are doing. And keep in mind that this will be a breaking change because this new mechanism will also affect how the controller is doing the calling for notebooks. So you will need to change some of the environment variables in the controller if you were using calling. Next up, we have some improvements in our front end in our effort to make all of the apps to be more cohesive in their user experience. We've introduced some browser pagination to not let the page increase for all the entries. We now have some very basic pagination, and the tables are now responsive so they can be more efficient in the browser. And last but not least, we have extended the web app for spawning notebooks to actually allow users to be able to fully define the spec of the PVC when they create a notebook. Now, this can give more advanced users more freedom to do whatever Kubernetes allows us to do. So we can now, from now on, users will be able to add things like the storage class of PVCs, or even use more advanced scenarios like Kubernetes snapshots. Again, this is a breaking change because the config map of the web app of the Jupyter web app will have a different format. So people will need to migrate to the newest config map, to the newest structure of the config map to ensure that the web app will behave as expected. So that's it for notebooks. And the next slide, we'll also see the manifest working group. So for manifest, again, alongside our effort to help users migrate to Kserve, just for this release, we're going to be including both the KF serving and the Kserve manifest, although we're really giving a huge importance and gravity to the Kserve effort. And this is why, by default, if you install Kubeflow, you'll be using the Kserve installation by default. But for some users that might not be yet ready, they can still keep in mind that they have KF serving on their arsenal. Next up, we have created some scripts for this release cycle for running a basic end-to-end test scenario to validate installation. And we're very happy for the next step of this effort, which will be to also integrate this test on each pull request so we can have more automation and feel more sure about each release and each commit that we merge. And then, equally important, we've bumped up the version of some of our common components like Istio and Cert Manager. And one of the main reasons for that, aside from just going to the latest version, is Kubernetes 1.22 support. And with this, I'd like to get you back to Josh to continue on with the presentation.
Thanks, Kimonis, and great job wearing the multiple hats there. We truly appreciate your work and efforts. This slide is an attempt to kind of collect some important alerts on the release, including the breaking changes. And this is just a recap of the breaking changes that the Notebooks working group has gone over before, as well as the breaking changes from the CATIB and some of the training operator related features. But I would suggest that you look at this presentation and those issues as you start your integration or your migration of 1.5. Additionally, for those who are migrating from Kubeflow 0.6.1 to Kserve 0.7, there's a nice migration guide which Paul had referenced, and I've also put on this slide that you can click through to. And just a quick note on Kubernetes 1.22 support. The community always encourages testing, but Kubernetes 1.22 is not formally supported with Kubeflow 1.5. And so although several of the services have tested with 1.22 and will run with 1.22, there's still some outstanding work on a few of the working groups. And what we would like is if you either find issues or are very much interested in 1.22, please look at that issue 6353, perhaps put some comments there. It will help us to track the interest in 1.22, which is on the roadmap for us. As we look to go forward, we are always looking at what are the biggest gaps in Kubeflow, and this is just from the user survey again. Folks giving us response that the community needs to work on documentation, on tutorials and installation. And from that, you can see that we do have a getting started guides that are available. So we're giving you pointing to a place to go and find information on installation. And then on documentation, you've seen that we have tracking issues. And I think that's a great way for folks who want to see where either their distribution maturity is, if they're running on AWS or on GCP or on IBM, Aricto. You can see the tracking issues and find people that can help you with those particular distributions in those environments. And then finally, the tutorials. I would like to say that we've tried to concentrate all the testing in the end-to-end MNIST tutorial because it did provide this end-to-end test sequence where you can start a notebook, run a pipeline, execute a training job, have hyperparameter tuning, and have model serving. And as we went through the test sequences of the RCs, folks continually tested that end-to-end workflow. And so that's a great place for you to get started. There's also a Kserve tutorial that will allow you to run your first inference server on 1.5. So you can define, create, and check an inference service, post an inference request, and receive a response. Optionally, you can run some performance tests. And with that, I'd like to close up with, for those who would like to continue to grow the community, I think we have about 5,000 or 6,000 Slack members now. Please feel free to join the Slack community. There's a link there. If you have any problems, please feel free to reach out to us and try to attend the community meetings. I think you can learn a lot, both from the community meetings and the working group meetings, where you can get hands-on with the people that are doing the development and fixing the bugs. Check out the GitHub repo and perhaps volunteer to work on some of the pull requests. I think you'll meet a lot of the market leaders that way. And we definitely are excited to promote the end-to-end MNIST demonstration, which we'll walk through in the community meeting on March 29th at that meeting at 8 a.m. in Pacific time. So just to close up, I want to thank all the users for all their work and input, and also all the folks that did the hard work, whether it was the release team, the working group leads, and the working group contributors, and the distribution teams. All of them came together and were able to deliver, which I believe, with good quality, on time, and good communication. Special thanks to Kubernetes. Once again, release team lead, really did help shepherd this one through. Thank you very much, Kubernetes. With that, I'm going to close out, and we look forward to your comments and to your success with Kubeflow 1.5.